Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of 4305 Back of the House video, and this time on food and beverage costing. F&B industry or restaurants in general have a bad reputation when it comes to how often new business opens and then closes within the first few years. Of course, one of the reasons may be because people seem to think that operating a restaurant is easy even without any experience. But another reason why many restaurants fail is because they fail to see the importance of controlling the costs or not knowing how to do so. Restaurants generally have such a low profit margin compared to some other industries that if you do not carefully control your costs, you will soon be closing your doors for good. Food cost can mean anything from cost of a recipe to the cost incurred for the entire month and can also be represented in percent form. But in this video, we will focus on food cost in terms of recipe costing. When we begin talking about recipe costing, one of the first concepts you need to understand is AP, EP, and yield percent. AP stands for as purchased, and EP stands for edible portion, but all it means is that AP refers to weight or cost of a certain product as you would have purchased it. In the restaurants, usually you would have your chefs prepare these items further so that you can use it in the dish, and that's edible portion, the part you can eat. Now, the yield percent represents how much of the whole product, which is AP, can you use in percent format. So let's say you purchased 10 kilo of whole onions and you've paid $2 per kilo for them. And in order for you to use them, you would have to peel them and cut them, and you were left with 8 kilos. Which means that in this example, AP weight is 10 kilograms and EP weight is 8. And yield percent is 80%. Simple enough? Now, if we are talking about EP or AP costs, then AP cost would simply be how much you paid for it per weight unit. In this example, it was $2 per kilo. Then how about EP cost? To calculate your EP cost, you would simply need to figure out how much did you spend for the usable portion or edible portion. The truth is that you still spent the same amount of money, which is $2 per kilo for 10. Just because you had to clean and throw away the peels does not mean you paid less for it. So in this example, you paid $20 for the EP weight of 8 kilos, which means your EP cost is $2.5 per kilo. Another consideration for yield percent is that meat products also would have yield percent. If you purchase a whole chicken and only using breasts in the recipe, then you would also have to consider the yield percent. If you use cooked meats in your recipe, say cooked bacon strips, then you would need to consider yield percent as well, since you would lose some weight during the cooking process. In the previous video, you learned about the basics of recipe writing, and recipes can be written using EP or AP. Let's look at this example. This recipe is written with onion julienne, which means you are skipping the first obvious step of cleaning up and peeling the onion to simplify the recipe, which many chefs do in practice. Another way the recipe can be written is like this, using onion whole. In this example, your first step is to peel and cut the onion. So which one is correct? There is no easy answer to this one, but generally speaking, by using EP in your recipe, you should be able to get more consistent results than if you were to use the AP in your recipe, since you may get varying amounts of usable onion if you use the AP in your recipe. Now that you understand EP, AP, and yield percent, let's talk about Q factor. Q factor represents ingredient costs that is difficult to measure or calculate. It is usually between 1 to 10% of the actual cost and can be added to the recipe cost. So if the recipe cost of one portion of French fries is $1 and Q factor is 5%, then you should consider adding 5 cents. So it would be $1.05 for the recipe cost. Now let's put that all together. This is a recipe cost card, which is a tool that is used to figure out the cost of a recipe. In this example, we have oil, onions, and salt and pepper as the ingredient for sauteed onion recipe, and this would make 10 portions. Ingredients such as oil, you would assume you use the whole bottle when you purchase it, so the yield percent is 100%. Or you can simply put the amount in AP column. For onion, since the recipe is written in EP, which is julienne onion, so you would put that in EP column. Then you can calculate the AP amount, which will give you 1.25. These columns show how much you are spending to buy the ingredients and in what packaging. For oil, you are spending 100, let's say Hong Kong dollar, for 5-liter bottle. And for onion, you are spending 20 Hong Kong dollar per kilo. Since your recipe units and purchase units are different, you would need to use unit conversion to make it equal. All it is that how much of recipe unit is in the purchase unit. In this example, for onion, it is the same. You're buying kilo and in the recipe, you're using kilos. But for oil, you have milliliter for the recipe and 5-liter bottle as purchase unit. There are 5,000 milliliter in a 5-liter bottle, so you put 5,000 here. Then you can calculate the cost of an ingredient by AP times unit price divided by the conversion. Once you have all of your ingredients cost together, add them all up to get subtotal. Then here comes Q factor. Simply consider what the 5% of the subtotal is and then add to the recipe. Then finally, since this recipe makes 10 portions, you need to divide this by 10 and you have cost of 1 portion. I hope this video will be useful when you have to write and cost out your next recipe, and make sure to think about EP, AP, and yield when you are writing your recipe. Thanks for joining again for this time on 4305 Back of the House video on recipe costing, and see you guys next time.